Hello, a very good afternoon to everybody here. And my name is Prabjeet Singh. Welcome to ABP Education. Today we have the next seminar in the Campus to Career series. And before I talk about the webinar today, let me introduce to you abpeducation.com. abpeducation.com is basically a news portal introduced by the Anand Bazar Patrika group. It deals in higher education news, and everything that happens in the world of higher education is covered by us. Exams, results, tips, guidance, and even global universities abroad are covered by us. And so we are powered by the Telegraph Online and anandabazar.com. Now coming down to the Campus to Career series and the webinar today. The Campus to Career series started on August 12 with the Bengal Education Leaders Summit with Mr. Partho Chatterjee, the State Education Minister, attending it. And now I'd like to talk about the webinar today, Language and Linguistics, the Global Connect. With that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First on the panel is Professor Anand Dolal, academic, translator, and theatre critic. Former professor of English at Jadavpur University, Mr. Lal currently heads the Writers' Workshop, one of India's oldest creative writing publishers, and runs the portal kolkatatheatre.com. Has taught theatre at the University of Illinois, USA. Welcome, Mr. Lal. Next on the panel is Ms. Dolan Gupta, learning consultant. Ms. Gupta specializes in articulation in English, intercultural communication and management, acquisition of natural languages, and soft skills. She was the global head of culture and language initiatives at Tata Consultancy Services. Next on the panel is Dr. Debanjan Chakrabarti, Acting Country Director, British Council, India. Substantive role, Area Director, East and Northeast India. Mr. Chakrabarti has over 18 years of experience in leading education, development, and cultural collaboration programs in India and internationally for British Council. Welcome, Mr. Chakrabarti. Next on the panel, Dr. Shrikant Joshi, Senior Linguist, Cactus Communications. He's also visiting lecturer, Department of Foreign Languages, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. He's also visiting lecturer, Department of Japanese, Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapeeth. Dr. Joshi is a researcher in the fields of linguistics and computational linguistics. Welcome, Mr. Joshi. Next on the panel is Dr. Sandesha Gabriel, Assistant Professor, Linguistic Empowerment Cell, JNU. Dr. Rayappa Gabriel specializes in the area of English language teaching with a PhD focusing on syllabus design for communication skills. She aims to use her experience for running positive, focused, and energized classes. Welcome, ma'am. And now introducing our moderator, Ms. Anita Mitra, Project Manager, Educational Services, Goethe Institute, Max Muller Bhavan, Kolkata. Ms. Mitra is an educator and education manager and has been working closely with young adults for more than 12 years. With this, I'd like to hand over the session to Ms. Mitra and have a great one, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Shetty. Thank you, ABP Education, for organizing and taking this wonderful initiative. Before I move to today's topic of language and linguistics, the Global Connect, I would like to give out some information to our participants. I would request them, this is an interactive session and we would love to hear your voice. So please feel free to write your questions. Use the question answer box that you can see in the panel, not the chat box. Try to use the question answer box. And you can, of course, write comments and also challenge ideas that are presented here. And I will be taking up the question answers in the question answer segment after the speakers have shared their thoughts on the. So coming to today's topic, language and linguistics, the global connect. Language is the very essence of what makes us human, setting us apart from all other species. Linguistics helps us analyze, discuss, and model this fascinating human attribute so that we can understand ourselves and also human society more fully. Yet, when it comes to choosing a career in language and linguistics, we many a times can only think of mainly the teaching professions and the academic field. In today's webinar, we will be exploring other paths, and our panel of experts will be shedding light on other possibilities, other combinations with language, and busting some myths. So without ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Professor Anandalal, to please take the stage.
Is that all right now? Anita, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
All right. I think there might be some connectivity issue with my video, which is why I'm looking more blurred than I normally look. So please forgive me for that. But without further ado, let me just kind of say what I have to. I'm not a specialist linguist. I come from a literature department. But of course, language is the basis of literature. And to step back to the point that Anita was making about what distinguishes us as a species, because we are, the cliche goes, a social animal. Language is that specialized, devised code that we as a species have invented for communication with other members of our community. And this is very strange because although we are one single species, we speak thousands of languages. That is really a unique kind of development in evolution, I would say. As a result of which, language completely breaks down. That code that we have invented breaks down immediately when you meet somebody else who speaks a different language that you don't know of. And therefore, we have to kind of fall back completely on gestures, which is not the way, of course, we should be communicating. We are actually moving ahead to a point in the future when there will perhaps be, if there isn't already, a kind of international language. And I would be brazen enough to suggest perhaps that English is moving in that direction, because it is pretty much recognized as even the standard scientific language, and of course, a major language of communication across the world. Now, I'm not getting into the statistics here. Of course, we do know that Mandarin Chinese outnumbers English, but then we can speak about that perhaps later on. The linguists might be able to shed some more light on these issues of specific languages. One of the funny things that has always struck me is that even though language is, like mathematics is one enters of our species and how we communicate. There are very few language departments per se in Indian higher education. Instead, we have literature departments. And that is by default. What happens very often is those younger people who are interested in language actually join the various literature departments. That could be English, that could be Hindi, that could be any of the regional languages. This is a bit perhaps of a problem, one might think. But on the other hand, there's nothing wrong in this if you look at it from the perspective of literature, the simplest and most sophisticated use of language. So those younger people leaving school or maybe leaving college with a bachelor's degree who have a flair for writing, sensitivity to words, might even want to be creative writers, might be wanting to become figures in literature, they naturally gravitate to these departments, including those who may not be interested necessarily in literature. So where the, do I continue, Anita? I might have got, I'm not seeing myself on the screen. Is that a problem?
We can see you.
Okay.
We can hear you, Anandudha.
Okay, fine. So let's then continue. So at these departments, mostly literature departments, most of them, in fact, English departments in India, we have the possibility of the skills of the younger people being honed for their particular needs. And this is not necessarily only, let's say you want to become a famous, best-selling author. That too, because of course you're exposed to all the great literature exponents from all over the world. But it's not just about writing, because you can go on within literature departments to ultimately get into pretty much every profession that requires either writing or speaking, for that matter, which is where, for instance, an area like theater comes into the picture, and communication. For instance, business management, journalism, media, including obviously electronic, advertising. Many of our graduates have gone into these professions. So this is, in one way you can say it's, the discipline is a combination of the generalist with the specialist. But also, nowadays, you have most literature departments no longer exclusively teaching literature as they used to, let's say 20 years ago, but expanding into culture studies, which is a great thing, I think. Yes, some people will say that where is the intellectual rigor? You're abandoning literature, but that's not in fact true. Exposed to all kinds of gender studies, translation, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then you are in a zone who are prepared to become change makers in society. And translation is one of these areas that I think both from linguistics and from literature, for obvious wider outreach to our global community and within the nation of India, it is extremely important that we communicate with each other and we do this accurately. We do not get into conflicts that might arise, whether military or otherwise, because one side cannot speak the other's language, or for that matter, is being mistranslated, misinterpreted in the other person's language. So the specialized methods of translation are now getting more attention in these departments. There are also specific areas of interpreting, being a professional interpreter. We've seen that on TV on many occasions, or even a lot of things that I have been doing by way of subtitling, dubbing for film, for television. These are actually requiring much more skill and training than you would naturally think is required, because we often take translation much too lightly. Oh, we know Bangla, we know Hindi, we can translate back and forth. Yes, we are a bilingual country, trilingual perhaps, which is great. But in fact, faithful in one person's speech, writing to the other, we need to be much more careful, and we need to apply these methods. I think I'll leave it at this, Anita, because we just have a few minutes to make our opening presentations. Is that all right?
Thank you, Professor Lal, for your valuable inputs here, and also your comments. I think for students who are studying literature and wondering what they can do afterwards will be very helpful. I would like to now move on to our next speaker, Dr. Sandesha Gabriel. Could you please share your thoughts on the topic?
All right. Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. It's thank you. And I want to begin by saying thank you to ABP for inviting me to be one of the panelists. I'm quite passionate about linguistics, so I'm really excited to talk to you and introduce you to this beautiful subject. So linguistics, as Professor Lal was just describing about, language and literature and linguistics. So linguistics is the scientific study of language, all right? What does it entail? So when you're looking at something, let's say phonetics. Phonetics is the study of sounds, right? And then when you have study of phonemes rather, and when you have phonology, it's a study of speech sounds. And then if you look at morphology, it's the study of structure of words. You're looking at syntax, going into study of sentences. So within that, you have semantics, where we are talking about studying about the meaning, and then pragmatics and discourse. And after me, I think Dr. Joshi will take it further, where he'll introduce you to the beautiful world of computational linguistics. So when you further go on into linguistics, you have something known as applied linguistics, where you're actually studying about the application of linguistics in the world, all right? And within that, you have something known as ELT, which is English language teaching. And this is my area of specialization. And I would also like to introduce you to the possible professions and careers that can be taken up after somebody has done this entire, post-graduation or MPhil or a PhD in linguistics. So when you look at in India, generally we don't have linguistics as a bachelor's course, unfortunately, for whatever reasons. And we have senior professors who have been talking and who have been wanting, and I can already see my fellow panelists nodding their head, which I believe they're in agreement that even they're wondering why linguistics is not open up in our beautiful country, because India as a nation is a country which people say has many countries within it, right? We believe in unity and diversity. We have thousands of languages, all right? Even if the constitution might have just talked about having 22 as the scheduled languages, we have more than them. And when you're looking at if you're thinking, how does linguistics affect my life? Well, I can give you a classic example. Even the states that were formed in our country were on the basis of the linguistic principles. You can check it if you don't believe me. All right. Even in the recent past, where we had 3 new states being formed, in fact, one of them being my own state of Uttarakhand, they were formed on the basis of certain social linguistics, certain historical reasons. And even if you have not done a graduation in linguistics, don't worry about it, because the way that linguistics is, people have done their engineering. People have, in fact, I've also met people who've done their MBBS and have actually got into linguistics. People have done history, people have done sociology, people have done mathematics, anything and everything under the sun. If you've done your graduation in that and you decide to not go in that particular field further on and would like to maybe incorporate it into the world of linguistics, please go right ahead. Come into the world of linguistics, do your master's and take it further. For example, let's take, there's somebody who's interested in history. You can actually combine history with linguistics and you have something like historical linguistics, all right? Where you can actually maybe prove through the language whatever the claim is of that particular area, where they are saying that their roots or their history is connected to a particular region. So I'm just giving you an example, right? Suppose you have a love of animals and you believe in animal communication. You believe that, yes, you want to work in that area further. So you could obviously get into, studying after your zoology or BSc or botany or whatever. And there are people who are actually working on, like, people believe that even plants have a way to communicate with each other. So that's like taking it to a next complete level. And then you have these other subjects wherein you have neurocognitive kind of linguistics, wherein you have, I worked on a project with one of my professors on biolinguistics during my, just after my master's, after my first year of MPhil coursework. And now with the MPhil going out, getting phased out, you can directly get into a PhD. Obviously, all these masters or direct PhD programs, you need to clear your entrance exams. All right. So that is definitely one thing that you need to look at. If you look at our country is divided into different language families, and 79% of them is under the Indo-Aryan language family, all right, wherein you have languages like Hindi, Bengali, Gujarati, Sindhi, all of them coming into within that language family. And then in the Dravidian one, you would have Tamil being the oldest one, and then you have Kannada, you have Telugu, and Malayalam being the youngest one. So Anita, you'll have to tell me the time, so just in case I'm a teacher, so I can keep on talking. So somebody needs to stop me. So just let me know when I just have a minute left.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. And then you have like I was mentioning, 79% is Indo-Aryan, approximately 19.6% is Dravidian, and what you are left with is approximately around 2.1%, which is to do with Tibeto-Burman language families and Austroasiatic language families. There's a lot of talk about mother tongue and everything, all right? Let me tell you, there are many people in our country, like me, who don't know their own mother tongue for whatever reasons. We could have been born and raised in another country. We could have been born and raised in another region. Our parents might not have been speaking to us in that particular language because we had English, Hindi, and a third language to learn. So these are kind of, things, areas where you might want to work further on. The other thing I want to talk about is there's a lot of talk about Sanskrit being a mathematical language. Yes, I do agree. This is the reason why that Sanskrit is also taught in, in NASA. I went to the Kennedy Space Center, and I was actually having an interaction with somebody who was talking about how they were getting, Sanskrit teachers from India to teach the teachers out there, and also to teach their scientific officers. Now, the other thing is that we need to respect languages like Sanskrit and other languages. At the same time, we should not neglect our other regional and indigenous languages, because our indigenous languages, they carry this amazing knowledge with them that needs to be worked on further. So the respect for our languages, wherever they are from, and we need to definitely look at that further. I will talk more later once the questions start coming in. I just thought I would kind of get all of you to plunge into the world of linguistics, and let's see how it goes. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. I mean, I think, especially addressing that one can do history, bachelor's in history, and then move on to linguistics or combine this is something that would help the students. I mean, I could think of my time during a student, I was probably also confused whether there were possibilities as such. And now I would like to invite Dr. Joshi to share his views.
Thank you, Ms. Mitra. I would like to thank ABP for inviting me to be a part of this prestigious panel. I'll take a cue from what Ms. Mitra introduced right at the beginning. And she said this session will also be about busting a few myths. So I'll take a cue from that. And I'll basically, looking at only 5 or 6 minutes that we have, I'll concentrate on 3 main points here. First, I'll try and demystify linguistics, or free it of whatever misconceptions that exist today. Then so that will be what linguistics is not. Then I'll move on to what linguistics actually is, and then why study linguistics? I mean, why go through all this trouble? So as I said, in my experience, in our society, as Dr. Sandesha also mentioned, we don't really have that much awareness of linguistics as a field of study. So so there are a few misconceptions going around, like if somebody speaks, say, 5 languages, is that person a linguist? I would like to say that linguistics is a very scientific way of looking at language. So you need to study language. So studying a language and learning a language are two different things. So you may speak 5 languages, but you may still not be a linguist. So you may be a polyglot, but not a linguist. On the other hand, you may still speak only 1 language, and you may still be a linguist. So linguistics is about the scientific attitude towards language. Another misconception that, misconception, or I would say lack of awareness, is linguistics, is it the same as translation, interpretation, or is it the same as teaching language? So I would just like to clarify that it's not the same. So don't get me wrong. It's not a hierarchical arrangement of any profession that I'm alluding to here. It's just that these different professions have different skill sets, requirements, and they have different contributions to the world of languages themselves. But being a linguist is different than being a translator or interpreter. It's also different being a teacher of a language. All that actually can come together to, as I said, to contribute to the bigger world of languages. Now, if linguistics is not all this, what is it? So as Dr. Sandesha mentioned, it is a scientific study of language. So many of you, I hope you remember, you did science experiments back in school, and you used to write journals, chemistry, physics journals. So there used to be an aim, apparatus, then steps to carry out, then the observations, and then some calculations and the inference. So of course, this applies to linguistics as well, this being a scientific study of language. So you start off with a hypothesis, then you collect data, you form some observations, you collect data, you analyze data, and then you come to a conclusion, whether to corroborate your hypothesis or to modify it or to refute it totally. So all you need is basically a scientific thought process in order to study linguistics. So literature needs a different kind of mental setup. Translation needs a different kind of mental setup. Teaching a language needs a different kind of mental setup, and linguistics in its own requires a different kind of mental setup, which is more scientific and analytical in nature. So I'll move on to the third point. So why bother? If you can study literature, you can read books. If you are interested in language, you can read, you can compose poetry, you can write, and so on. Why linguistics? So now, for this question, there are 2 perspectives that you can take. One, you can use language as the main field of study, or one can have language just as a tool and then decide to pursue some other field of study. So depending on the perspective that you take, the kind of study that you would carry out changes. So if you want to take language as the main field of study, as I said, you have options to become a translator, an interpreter, a language teacher, or a linguist. So by becoming a linguist, again, I'll refer back to Dr. Sandesha, who mentioned a lot of undiscovered indigenous languages, not just in India, or the world across. So we have, it's estimated that we have around 5,000 or 6,000 languages in the world, and a lot of them, in fact, most of them are not documented, not known. So there's a whole lot to be done in the domain of field linguistics, where you actually go on the field, you talk to people, you collect samples, you analyze, you document the data, and so on. So that's one. Then you have other fields like psycholinguistics, neurolinguistics, sociolinguistics, wherein you can combine your passion with other fields of study and your passion with language, and then do some research over there. A new field, well, not new anymore, that's coming up is computational linguistics or natural language processing, or as it's known more popularly, the AI, the artificial intelligence. So you need to have the computing inclination, and you can combine your passion for languages and then help come up with amazing systems like you must have seen or even used Alexa, Siri, or even Google Translate, or even Microsoft Word that tells you that you made a spelling mistake somewhere, you made a grammar mistake somewhere. So, I mean, the opportunities are endless. It's just that you need to, like, as students, you need to read more and more, talk to more and more people, and discover your passion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi, and thank you for busting and the myths and clarifying a lot of common misconceptions regarding language and linguistics. We would like to move on now to Mrs. Dolan Gupta. Mrs. Gupta, could you tell us a little bit about what is the importance or what is the role of language in communication and in the business sector or in the professional sector?
Right. Thank you. Thank you. And I was just listening to what Dr. Joshi was saying, that language as a field of study and language as an add-on, you could say. So for those who have taken up language as a field of study in the corporate sector, yes, there is a lot of focus today on communication training. Companies are investing in a very big way on communication training, on development, in-house development of courses. So if linguistics or language is your area, that is definitely something that one can look at. But even if language is not your area of study, if you are a scientist, if you're an engineer, if you're a lawyer, you can be in any other field, even then, well, we don't say language or linguistics is important to you. It is extremely important in the business sector. And that is what I'd like to talk a little more about, that everyone needs it, and why they need it. You know, to me, language is like a kind of a Lego game, where you have these tiny little bits and pieces, which the most familiar unit, the word, we take them up, we string them together, and there is a sentence. But it's not really as simple as that, because that sentence is not just for information or for a transaction, because it is through language that we are also expressing our feelings, our emotions, our intentions, our objectives. There's much more that we are weaving into language. And that is where expressing yourself is an art. It's not just a simple stringing together a few words in a sequence. But I would say that is only half the art, because in any conversation scenario, there will be other partners. We don't speak in a void. And that other partner or partners, they come in with their objectives, their feelings, their intentions. And the reality that gets created during that interaction, that's a dynamic creation. It cannot be precast or predetermined that what is going to happen during that interaction. But it may not be predetermined, but it can definitely be controlled to some extent. And who controls it? It's the person who understands best the other person's intentions, feelings, emotions, intentions. And that is the other half of the art of communication, and the more difficult part. And it is this dynamic interaction. This is the space where companies are investing in communication training. And I'll just read a line from the World Economic Forum report, which says this is an essential skill for anyone to survive in the workplace of the future. It says, being aware of others' reactions and understanding why they react as they do. This is what I'm talking about when I say that there is dynamic interaction and dynamic co-creation of reality during any kind of conversation. And well, the next point I'd like to say is that to get a job, do you really need to know your language? Do you need to be a good communications expert? Because you are hired on the basis of your degree and your grades. But as the saying goes, you're hired for your hard skills, but you're fired for your soft skills. Once you are inside a job, okay, you've got the job, your hard skills got you that. But to survive and grow in the workplace, that's when soft skills, interpersonal skills, communication skills, these are all used interchangeably. that's when these come in, very useful. And that's what provides the competitive edge, because everybody comes in with their hard skills and people are more or less at par over there. The differentiating factor is often the communication skill. And again, Dr. Joshi just spoke about artificial intelligence. There are some other reports which say that, I'll just read that part out to you. Well, data, the top of the list, information and data processing. 62% of work in this field will be taken over by machines by 2022. And compare that, bottom of the list is communicating and interacting, where only 31% of communicating and interacting is going to get taken over by machines. That's the slowest pace at which machines can take over our work as humans. So again, ties up with what the previous speaker says, that language is what makes us human. That is a quality which is not really so easily replicable through machines. And when there are teams that are working together, it is communication which becomes very important. And of the 21st century, we talk of the 4 critical skills of the 21st century, the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity. So I don't think we need to really emphasize the value of language over here, because language is the basis of communication. Now, there are 2 factors that are in the workspace, in the business space, which are really enhancing the use of communication skills, the sharpening of communication skills. The first factor is virtual working. Much before COVID struck, there are virtual teams that are working. People don't meet each other. It's not that we go to canteen for lunch and have a catch up for dinner after work and build our rapport. No, things are happening via phone calls, via messages, via emails, which means things are happening through words. Even body language, the nonverbal skills are being cut out. It's primarily being focused on verbal and paraverbal skills that are coming into play. And that's all one has to build that rapport, to build that interpersonal skill. So the virtual teams, where you might never ever physically meet your teammate, has made communications a very critical skill. And the second factor that has made communication a critical skill is globalization. Because when we are talking of teams, we are talking of multilingual, multicultural teams. So the other person who is part of my team is coming with their mindsets, attitudes, value systems, communication styles, which could be absolutely different from the one I'm accustomed to. So surviving in this multilingual or multicultural team, I mean, there are tons of skills one can go into detail, but I'm not going to go in there. But surviving in that, knowing how to communicate and how to understand the other person's mindset, what the World Economic Forum report said, understanding the other is going to be a very crucial skill. And it makes sense for companies to invest in it, because better communication leads to better collaboration, which leads to higher productivity, higher return on investment. And for the individual also, it makes sense to invest in it, because better communication means fast tracking your professional growth. So for both sets, it makes sense. And that is why today, good communication skill is no longer that good to have skill. It is the must-have skill, which is providing the competitive edge that your hard skills may not be able to provide you. So I'll stop there. It's a subject I'm very passionate about, and I'm really afraid that I'll just go on talking about it. So I'll stop right here. Thank you. Thank you, Anita.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Gupta. I think the students will really appreciate your practical tips. And what also really resonated with me deeply is what you said about what differentiates you as an employee, because we can see that in all walks of life. I come from a teaching profession, from a teaching background, and I can see it also that communication skills are something essential, especially for teachers, and also in any organization. So thank you very much. Before we move on to our final panelist, I would just like to remind the audience to post their questions in the question answer box so that we can take it up in the second segment. And now I would like Dr. Chakraborty to, from the British Council, to share his views. And I think we all have this question to Dr. Chakraborty, that what is the role of the English language in modern India?
Right, thank you. Can you hear me all right? Can I just once check the audio? Not
Yes,
too
we can
bothered
hear you.
about the video. First up, thank you very much to ABP Education for inviting me to join this panel. It's a great privilege to be among all of you, and in particular, I guess, my own teacher, Professor Anandolal. So it is very humbling for me to be part of this panel. I will begin by referring to something that Anandoda touched upon very lightly, which is on the production pipeline, for lack of a better word, of students of English literature departments. And I am possibly an example. I've dabbled in a number of things. I started my career with the ABP group, and one of the reasons why I agreed, I quite jumped at the opportunity when this was presented to me, is to pay my gratitude to the ABP group in kickstarting my career. So I've been a journalist. I've taught in Vishwabharati University in a literature department. I've been a researcher and again taught in my university in the UK where I did my PhD in literature, but also I brought in a multidisciplinary approach. It was on media studies as well. And then I've been working for the British Council for a long time now. And English language has played a really key role in my own professional journey, though haphazard it had been at the early stages. But all of those careers early on has helped me be the professional I am in whatever I've achieved in some way or form. Let me just touch upon a phrase that I think has been alluded to by almost all the speakers here, which is that we live in a prison house of language. So this is not an original formulation. It's the German philosopher Nietzsche had propounded this idea, and Frederick Jameson has a famous book on the prison house of language on structuralism. And I think the question that you asked, Anita, about the importance of English in India is within that framework of both, I think part of it is history, the short history of India, and part of it is how we have evolved since 1947. Just to step back a little bit from the academic discussions, and Anandoda did mention, and other speakers have mentioned culture and especially popular culture. Think of the song Kolavaridi. Is that what kind of a text is it? Is it an English text? Is it a Tamil song? And I think that is where I'll begin by saying that, English is, I think, as much an Indian language as it is a British language, as it's an American language, as it's an Australian language, as it's a New Zealander's language, as it is the language of part of Canada. India is now the second largest English language book publishing industry. It's gone ahead of the UK. So US is the largest English language publishing market. India is the second largest. UK is the third largest English language publishing industry. So, and in terms of the constitution, English is one of India's two official languages. And its importance cannot be understated. There are issues, of course, and we will touch upon that hopefully later. From British Council's side, we commissioned a number of important research on the users, also abusers of English not just in India, but globally. So there is an author who passed away last year, who became a great friend while we worked with him, David Gradle. David Gradle had published 3 books. We had commissioned, British Council had commissioned 3 very significant publications on English language, both globally and in India. The first book was in 1999, I think, called The Future of English, with a question mark at the end. And in that book, Gradle found out that among speakers of other languages trying to communicate in a linked language, English obviously was the dominant one internationally. And 78% of English users were non-native users of English. I think that is something that needs to be reckoned with. And this is 1999. So this is slightly ahead of the kind of the massive digital revolution that comes in post 2000. It's a bit ahead of it, and even then, over nearly 80% of English communication was happening between non-native speakers. And then Gradle went on to write 2 other books. One was called English Next, which looked at the future of English across the world post the digital revolution to a certain extent. And then in 2009, we commissioned him to write a book called English Next India. So he was looking, using the same kind of parameter for the future of global English. He put the lens on India. And Gradle's, it's a very slim book. It's available on our website. I would really recommend anyone interested in the question of the use of English to consult Gradle's books from our website. So Gradle talks about 3 major drivers for English in India. The first driver was English for higher education. For good or for worse, a vast majority of India's higher education works in English medium instruction. This is particularly true of the technical subjects, medical, engineering, almost all of the science disciplines. The STEM subjects operate almost entirely on English medium instruction. And it's also true of some other professions like law, accountancy. So unless you are studying a subject, a different language as a subject, or a literature as a subject, chances are that you have to make your way through Indian higher education system using English to a great extent. The second driver was English for employability prospects. And this is something that I think other panelists have touched upon. Dolan, you touched upon it substantially. And here again, we have some data and research. So we compiled a report called English for Employability in South Asia. So this was in partnership with Open University of UK. And here we found out about a piece of research that was not our own, but a research that said that there was a premium of as high as 30%, all other skills remaining equal, all the other domain skills remaining equal. A male subject, and this study was conducted only on men in urban contexts. The data set was quite restrictive in that sense, but there was an indication that people earned quite a bit more for the same set of skills, but if they spoke or used English better. And this is kind of also supported by Nandan Nilekani in his book, Reimagining India. And he has a full chapter devoted to the use of English and how it imparts a certain employability premium in people's careers. Very interestingly, Mr. Nilekani also touches upon the third aspect of English that David Gradle says is a very, very important driver within India, which is English for social mobility. And this has several dimensions to it. Nilekani says that, you know, English in urban contexts helps paper over some of the other divisive aspects uh, of Indian society, particularly caste. And I think there is, again, a growing voice around this. Just yesterday, I was reading a piece by Kanchailaya Shepherd on the need for English. And I think the Dalit movement in India has been making very consistent appeal for English as something that helps overcome some of the caste barriers of a Brahminic order. I think I will stop there. I have responded to the overall framework, but I know that there are a lot of questions. There are questions on English in national education policy, particularly in the early foundational years as it's been set out. And I'll be happy to respond to some of that because we have some research, as we say, about the downsides of English in certain aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chakraborty. I would like to ask you a question here itself because it's also in the panel before we go into the question answer round. That is, you've spoken about that English was always present in India in some form, and how do you think, how could the introduction of the Common European Framework of Reference of Languages in the school curriculum benefit Indian students? Because you have spoken about a standardization or that certain subjects are taught or only studied in English. So yet there is no, the Common European Framework of Reference is not introduced in our school systems. What is your take on that?
I think that's a very interesting way of looking at the problem. For those of the viewers and listeners who are unfamiliar with the Common European Framework of Languages, CEFR, it's called in short, please Google it. But a short and sweet version of it is that it is language agnostic. It doesn't reduce is not quite the word, but it provides a kind of framework to assess languages on a series of can-do statements. So can you go to the market, use say Hindi? Can you use Hindi in the marketplace? Can you use Hindi in an academic context? So based on that, there are 6 scales, A1 to C2. So A1 is the lowest part of the scale. It is where one can use a language, and it is again language agnostic. It says whether you can use a language in a very bare functional way to get by in a society that uses that language dominantly. And then A1, A2, B1, B2, and C1, C2. C2 being the level where you can use the language like a native user of the language in very sophisticated academic discourse, both in written and in spoken form. And in between, I mean, that also links to writing and listening. So that is the CEFR framework. I think it's a very interesting idea, but I don't think India has considered using anything resembling the CEFR framework for assessing language competency. I am aware that there were attempts made by what is now called the English and Foreign Languages University in Hyderabad, previously called CFL, about working out such a framework for Indian languages. I can come back to this group later on if there is such a mechanism on where that project stands. But at the moment, no, there isn't, I'm aware of any attempt to map on Indian languages on the CEFR framework. But I do agree that it will be a useful tool for Indian education system.
Thank you, Dr. Chakraborty. We will now move on to the second segment of the question answer round, and I will be taking questions from the audience. And I think the first question has been posed to Professor Anandalal. You have spoken about translation and also the scope of translators working in the film and television industry. So there are a few questions from the audience regarding this. One of them is, in which all areas would the expertise of a translator be required with respect to film and television industry? So what are the scopes for a translator in this field?
Is this all right now, Anita?
Yes, yeah, we can hear.
Basically, as far as the film and TV industry is concerned, there's a huge demand for subtitling and for dubbing. So if your language skills are good, then especially, of course, we've been noticing this in the English language, there is a massive demand for those who can subtitle, and also as far as those who are good speakers of English to dub, in other words, voiceover. Now, unfortunately, apart from very few film departments or mass communication departments where a little bit of this might be taught, there isn't any formal training. So you have to really literally learn, like I did, on this 40 years back in Doordarshan. Those were the bad old days. You have to learn hands-on. You literally have to have a knack for knowing how many characters, literally characters, fit onto the screen. And therefore, in effect, very often you would be reducing what is spoken on screen to something that can fit in so many letters underneath, in one line, preferably not in 2 lines. But you can make it 2 lines, but preferably in 1 line. So that is, of course, something that actually can be picked up as you go along. At the same time, it requires a massive expertise and knowledge in language, which I believe will come strongest from literature students. Does that answer the question, Anita? I hope.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, the next question, I think. Yes,
Anita, can I just respond to Anandada's response, if I may, Anandada, with your permission? You are right, of course, studying literature does equip students with a certain brevity and felicity of using the language. But I think there is one tool that really helps chisel language usage, which is Twitter. So I think I would like to urge all listeners and viewers that if you're good with Twitter, some of the things that Anandada said would come to you quite naturally. So that world of 140 characters is amazing in some ways.
Absolutely, Devanjan. But if I might just add to this, Anita, can I just, there is a problem with Twitter in terms of the single letters it uses, like for instance, U for YOU, or, all the other informalities, the colloquial usage of text that we do in SMS language.
One can avoid it also, Anandada. I mean, I think it's not.
No, but that as of now is not being permitted in subtitles.
What I meant was that you can avoid it in social media.
You can, certainly. Yes, you can avoid it.
I never do. I never use short forms.
But some of the Twitters that I come across could be reduced even further. And
you can tweet in emoticons completely. Roger Federer does that often.
Once again, emoticons maybe 10 years later on will replace a lot of the words that we use now.
It might, yeah.
But still, they still look for articulate subtitles. I don't know why, but they still ask for that.
Thank you. I think this gives me the cue to the next question, which is for Dr. Sandesha. Moving into social media, or rather in the virtual world, due to the current events, or like Mrs. Gupta said also earlier, virtual interviews have become part of the norm, so to say. And it's become, of course, a necessity in today's times. What tips could you give our students who are appearing for these virtual interviews, and how can they master the skill? If you could share some tips for the students, please.
All right. Thank you for the question. Quite important during these particular, days that we're in, because one of the first webinars that I did it for a private university where I had to give them tips about online interviews. I had done it last year, but this time they wanted it with regards to the online world, the virtual world. Because as you know, whenever anybody goes in for any sort of an interview, that person will get scared. The confidence level does tend to go down. Exactly like how Ms. Gupta said, it's not only just your knowledge, they're also looking at the whole package that we're looking at. They're looking at your body language, they're looking at your confidence and everything. So now when you look at something in the virtual world, the focus just changes. You know everybody's eyes on you, and whether you can get to see them or not, it's a complete, because if they switch off their video, you wouldn't even get to see their faces. So this is a different take altogether. One thing I want to go back to what Ms. Gupta was talking about. She talked about the 21st century life skills, extremely important, because the 4 C's that she talked about, she also talked about the IMT. She talked about, the information literacy, media literacy, technological literacy. You need to have the IMT skills. Because let's say you have your knowledge of, let's say I want to go for an interview to be an English language teacher. I have the knowledge of how to go about teaching. I have the experience of over 10 to 12 years or 15 years, but I have no technological knowledge of how to convey that message across. That will kind of, hamper my particular productivity. The third other important thing I want to talk about is flips, which is a part of the 21st century life skills, where you're talking about flexibility, you're talking about the innovation, you're talking about productivity, you're talking about the skill sets. So these kind of things are imperative that you need to combine them. One of the reasons why the online education could quickly, move in this country of ours is because I salute all the teachers, especially the school teachers, and then obviously the university, the faculty, and all the other teachers involved, who quickly adapted themselves to the situation. A lot of people, they didn't require to get, quickly adapt themselves, but they did it. So they, adapting to the entire situation, proved to their students that yes, this can be done. 3 months back, when we look at how our children or how our students were, they were also learning through the entire process of how to go onto the online platforms, and to now, there's a complete different change that is taking place. As far as the online interviews are concerned, if you do not have the confidence, first of all, you need to build on that. You might need to initially, if you do not have anybody to train you, you might need to take the help of a couple of your friends. You might need to interact with them through Zoom, through Cisco WebEx, through Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, whatever it might be. And let me also tell you, these online platforms, they can be online platforms, but they can also be different. There are teachers who are much more comfortable in interacting via Zoom as compared to Cisco WebEx. There are teachers who are much more comfortable with Google Meet as compared to Zoom. So everybody has their reasons. Like I like certain things about Zoom, wherein I like the breakout rooms where I want to do certain activities, which I prefer over the other mediums. But so those are little issues which happen. As far as the interview skills are concerned, once you train with a group of your friends and then you come on to the actual platform where you're actually having the interview, please remember that at the end of the day, we're all human beings. Even they know that it's not easy for you. You're as, scared as any other person would be. So you just need to calm down, calm your nerves. First of all, try to, think about something, try to, visualize that the other person is, also possibly, thinking of all the possible errors that can be made. So just try to calm down and then go ahead with the flow. And it is not always just the knowledge that they're looking at. They're always also looking at the aptitude, the attitude, and also the little bit of technological skills that you will pick up along the way. And like how, again, going back to what Ms. Gupta was talking about, 70% of the graduates in our country, they're not hireable. Why they're not hireable? Everybody in the corporate world is talking about it. Is because they're lacking in those certain skills, and they want the education world. It's not just India. We're talking about all over the world. The corporate world is telling, why aren't you teaching these graduates how to, work as a team? Why can't they adapt to this situation? Why can't they be creative? The reason is because we are so bogged down. We teachers are so bogged down with finishing our syllabus, getting those marks, because if the children don't get the marks, then you get the, you know, orders coming in. I'm talking about schools specifically, wherein principals start talking about why are we going down on these marks? Parents are coming. So this entire thing, you know, it's a catch-20 situation, I would say. So these issues are definitely going to be there. I want to also go back and say something about David Gradol's wonderful book, which Dr. Chatterjee talked about. It was one of my favorite books, which I had to go through it for my own PhD. And there's a very important line over there, which I would love to say right now. And David Gradol said in that book, it won't be the exact line, but more or less that people who have English, the knowledge of the English language, it's not necessarily advantageous for them, all right? But the people who do not have the knowledge of the English language, it is a disadvantage for them. And I want to give you a classic example of this. For example, last year I went in for a training for ATCs, all right, air traffic controllers. And everybody, if I ask you, who has your life in their hands, who's taking control of it when you're up in the air? Everybody thinks about pilots, next cabin crew. ATCs are like way back. Nobody wouldn't think about it. In fact, yesterday I asked an engineering student, do you know what is the job of an ATC? And the student goes, no. Like, he just texted me, no. So I told him, all right, you watch this show and I'm going to talk about it. An ATC is the person who has these dots on the screen, and each dot will have a lot of lives that he is taking care of. Now, can you imagine? An ATC is a person who has to have the knowledge of English language. Whether in our country they say it doesn't matter, but it does matter, because all over the world, the aviation industry, the pilots will communicate via the English language to the ATCs wherever they're going around the world. Now, for a fact, if you have somebody from a remote area who does not know English because that person learned Hindi, Bengali, and the third regional language, and they learn English when they are 10 years old or when they're in the 6th grade, they're good in science, they get through engineering or they get through BSc, they become an ATC, they come to the ATC and they go in for the interview, they will have issues. And once they become an ATC also, they will have an issue now, because we're having a testing which is taking place. So these are the reasons why when you're looking at the entire thing, English cannot be neglected. It has to be given its due. It is no longer the language of just, you know, a few countries. It is a global language. It is a link language, exactly like what Dr. Chatterjee was speaking about. And I'm sorry, I think I might have gone way beyond my time. Anita, I hope that has answered your question which you asked me, but I did see that there are many other questions if you want me to take them up, which I can see in the chat box.
I will get to that. I would just, since we are in talking about interviews and the communication skills, I would like to ask Ms. Gupta a few questions that have come up. One is, of course, what does the market for business communication training look like in India? Because from Dr. Sandesha's point of view, it should be a huge market, I mean, because since communication is something very important.
Yes, now this is something that I was just doing a little bit of work on. And from what I find, first of all, it's a very unorganized market. Because unlike many other countries, the first thing, we do not require a certification to become a business communication trainer in India. So it's unorganized, but the numbers are, there are close to 1 lakh business communication trainers of English in India. And I was just looking up Naukri.com. There are over 30,000 vacancies as we speak for business English trainers. That's the volume of the market today. And these trainers cover the entire range. There are small little centers in villages up to very, very sophisticated training modules of, corporates who are spending a lot of money. So the market is absolutely huge, and we find that there are a couple of players in the market. One is, there's the freelancer who's always there. And then companies employ in-house communication trainers, because again, that's for cost reasons. It's always more cost effective to have an in-house trainer, and entire teams. It's not just 1 or 2. You recruit things like 20, 50 communication trainers. Big companies do that. So, and then there are also small training institutes that work on a freelance basis, where they have a loose arrangement with a whole lot of freelancers, putting a stamp of quality on it, who work with, it could be a corporate house, it could be other places. So it's freelancers, small players in the market, and in-house experts. That's the kind of jobs that communication trainers get. But the market is huge, the market is growing. And there's something else that I would like to say here, that in most countries, there is an organized group of all business communication trainers. There is an official group, and which is not there in our country. We have academic groups of English language teachers. We do not have any group like that, and that is exactly what I'm working on. And I think in the next 2 months, we should be able to get that, put that together. Who are the business communication trainers? Can we put some standardization, certification, some measures to it? And I've already spoken to many other such groups from across the world, and they're ready to extend all support to us. So I hope that within a couple of months, we should at least start this process of loosely organizing this sector.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Gupta. I think this brings me to the next question. I think that's also what the students are thinking. What is the qualification required to become a corporate communication trainer? Now, you have told us about the market and that, you know, I mean, there is a huge market. So now what is the qualifications required?
And this is, again, I would like to mention this, something that really disappoints me, that when people are recruited to be a business English trainer, in India, the language of business is English. So we're talking of English over here. You should see the advertisements. It's undergrad in any discipline with good English language skills. And that really alarms me. What is good? And as Debanjan mentioned, we do not use the scale of A1 to C2. So who decides what is good? And any discipline? I mean, what are our poor English students doing? They have learned the subject. So we do not, so there is, unfortunately, as of now, qualifications are good in English. That is what is being asked for. However, again, that is another area I do hope that we will be able to make some headway, that there should be some kind of a level of what should a business communication trainer have as a qualification. As of now, it doesn't exist, but English language students do get the preference. They get the preference, definitely.
But if I could just, Ms. Gupta, if you're done, if I could just add on a couple of points. Yeah, sorry. So I just quickly want to add about this, continuing on with what Ms. Gupta said. When you're looking at the ads, yes, I do agree that they talk about anybody who's a graduate who has language skills in English, who can communicate and everything. But in reality, if you really want to create this as a niche, as a profession, if you want to be known as the top 3, at least in this industry, I would say that having a very good foundation of the English language is extremely important. And I'm not just talking about doing your bachelor's or your master's or your PhD. Just having a PhD in English language does not qualify you to be a very good communication skills trainer or an effective communicator. Let me just make that extremely clear. When Dr. Joshi was talking about breaking the myths or busting the myths, this is one extremely important myth that has to be busted. All right. ELT is a complete different world altogether. Everybody, please listen to me carefully. ELT is different from everything. We are not even talking about English language literature out here. We are not even talking about within linguistics domain. You could get into ELT through applied linguistics. I'll give you a classic example. Everybody, when you were in school, you might have been told, okay, what's the definition about articles? And you have definite, indefinite articles, and definite is the, indefinite is a or an, and it's so simple. Your teacher would say, you just place the and before the vowels, and everybody would say, what are vowels? And the teacher would go A, E, I, O, U. Now things are different. Now you are told about A, A, E, O, U. And this is the reason why now your teachers can explain to you better that why you have a university and not an university, because it's not the pronunciation of "u," but you have the pronunciation of "y," which is "you," university. So these are the kind of things, when you have a linguistic background, your teacher or whoever is explaining to you will tell you what is the difference between a vowel sound and a consonant sound. People in the English language, they have done their PhD. If they don't have any background knowledge of phonetics, they are not able to explain this. Only if you have some teacher who's explaining to you about phonetics will you be able to get it. Like, for example, vowels, what happens? Air goes in, air goes out, all right? But when the air which is coming out from the orifice, from your mouth, and when it is depending on the shape of your mouth, and when there is no obstruction, a, e, o, u, therefore it is a vowel sound. If there is an obstruction, it becomes a consonant sound, like a p, b, t, d, f, k. So this is what I'm trying to tell you. This basic knowledge of phonetics helps you in teaching the English language even better. Now, if you add this to becoming a communication skills trainer does not mean the person is going to come here and teach you English. Is not going to. Initially, 20 years back, when all the call centers were coming in India, everybody was looking for voice and accent trainers, all right? They thought that people who had English language, PhD, everything, they would be able to do it. But we know that the people who have PhDs in English language, they themselves might not be fluent in the English language. Let me be very honest with you about that. Then the other thing is this, that when you have communication skills training, you have other things which are incorporated within that. You have, apart from phonetics, you have also the body language, how to stand, how to talk, how to, do something with a team, as I talked about, collaboration. So these are the additional things that are required, which Ms. Gupta was talking about, soft skills. So these are extremely, these are parts and packages of whatever you might want to take further. Any knowledge that you might have does not go to waste. I was a science student. I was not an art student, but I got into the world of arts. I was telling Anita earlier about this, that people who are from the science, they can easily shift on into other worlds, all right? Same is the case for even for people from commerce. Linguistics absorbs everybody and anybody. What you want to do with that knowledge is all up to you. So Anita, sorry, thanks.
No, thank you a lot, Sandesha. Actually, this also brings me to our next question to Dr. Joshi. That is, I'm getting a few questions from the audience about, we'll move from the English language to the language of coding now. So, Dr. Joshi, this is also something that has been on my mind because we from the Goethe Institute also offer a lot of workshops for children in schools and also higher educational institutes, a combination of STEM subjects with language, with the German language, of course, in our case. And sometimes there are a few questions raised from, when we present these workshops, and they ask us, okay, so one doesn't really need to know German to be able to code. And we can see that the selection for the workshops are also sometimes done on the maths aptitude compared to the language aptitude. And I would really like to hear your opinion on this.
First of all, thank you for bringing up that question, because it's a very important one where people actually wonder, I mean, what would a language person do with programming, or why are language people not allowed to do programming, and so on. So I think this question is a multi-layered question. Okay, so I'll try and peel off the layers one by one. The first one is now it's almost a democratization of programming, so to speak. So to learn programming, you don't really need to have a maths degree or a science degree. I mean, there's a plethora of online platforms where you can learn programming, I mean, and just get certificates. And it is notable that companies nowadays, the barriers for traditional degrees and certificates are breaking down, and companies actually look at what you can do rather than which degree you have in front of your name. So, if you are really interested in programming and pursuing coding and computing applications, you can just go online, go to Coursera. There are so many of such online platforms where you can learn, where you can practice, and just be proficient in it. Now, having said that, can just anybody pick up programming and be a good programmer? Now, for that, certain skill sets, certain mind skill sets are required. So programming is a very analytical way of thinking about a problem or solving a problem. So it doesn't really matter whether you are a language student or a science student or a math student, as long as you have that analytical mindset and the ability to think logically about a problem, to break down a problem into sizable chunks and then solve them, I think you should do well in programming. That's the first layer. Another layer, actually, and as an add-on to that, is that now the industry trends are that people are developing no code programs. So that means you don't really have to do any coding. You just give ideas, you just build an algorithm, and the program itself does the coding part for you. So I mean, depending on how the progress happens in that direction, people may not even be required to do so much of coding in the future. But again, the next layer, coming to the next layer of the question, what do you need to be good at? As I said, you need to be very logical. You need to be very analytical in your thinking in order to enter this field. And linguistics actually it requires all these traits of mind. It needs you to be logical, systematic, analytical. So I don't think, in fact, I personally know a lot of linguists that are very good programmers and that are very tech savvy. So I don't think that's really a bar anymore. Another thing is, you don't even, I mean, entering into the field of like AI, for example, you don't really need to know programming. If you know it, that's very good. It will definitely help you. But there's a whole array of functions that need to be done around just programming. So a product development actually has so many stages, right from conceptualization. Then you have to have a good design in place. So people who know language can actually contribute as subject matter experts to development of these systems. So your contribution as a subject matter expert would be in designing a system, a good chatbot. Take a chatbot, for example, Alexa. So Alexa needs to be trained on conducting a dialogue, and that dialogue has to be, I mean, there's somebody who's sitting and programming it, but somebody has to design how the dialogue will go, what are the components that need to be coded, and so on. So there's a stage of conception, product design, then there's actually programming. But then after that, you need to test whether the program is actually running or not, whether it's giving you correct or expected output or not. So there also you need the subject matter expertise. So you need to be good at languages, or you need to have studied languages in order to be able to test Alexa, for example. I mean, I'm just taking Alexa as an example, no particular intention behind it, but any artificial intelligence system, you need to test it. So you need to be good at that. Then there's also pre-sales. Why not? You need to talk to clients and you need to sell the product to them. If you understand the product, if you understand the domain, you will be able to sell it better. You will be able to talk to your customers. You will be able to make them understand the whole product. There's also the later stage is also customer support, where you are actually talking to the customers, end users, trying to solve their problem. So if you look at the whole pipeline of end-to-end product development, and that can also apply to the artificial intelligence systems, programming is just one part of it. And so I don't think anybody should be anybody should have that mind block that I'm coming from a language background, how can I enter? In fact, you shouldn't have it, because programming, as I showed you, there are so many functions other than programming. And added to that, if you learn programming, if you are passionate enough, why not go for it, learn programming. These days, programming languages are becoming easier to learn, like Python. Like earlier in the day, you had C, C++, and then going up to like Fortran. So they were like very hard to learn. Java. Now, even programming languages are becoming user-friendly. So you can actually get your hands dirty with Python, for example. There are Python notebooks that you can construct and run. So you do your own snippets. The point is, if you know it, it's great. It will help you. Even if you don't know it, that shouldn't stop you from considering other options. And I mean, if you look at the whole pipeline of product development of artificial intelligence or computational linguistics for that matter, the contribution of each element is equally important. It's not just that the programmers, and now the industry has started realizing. Earlier there was a day when testing was not really given that much importance, or design was like kind of neglected, and programming was given the like the most important of all, importance of all. But that's not the case anymore. So I don't think anybody should have that mind block anywhere. If you know programming, that's great. Even if you don't know programming, you can still contribute to a lot of things. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it answered my question. So I'm sure also the audience will benefit from it. And we've already spoken about foreign language, I mean, in combination with coding, but also this question is, I guess, to the entire panel. I mean, I'm receiving a lot of questions here that what does learning a foreign language help? I mean, how does learning a foreign language help in the job market? There are many IT professionals who are asking this question from the audience, and also from other walks of life. So this is a very general question, and also to the entire panel. So please, if anybody would like to take it up, respond, I would.
Okay,
Listen,
so
yeah.
with the permission of all the panelists out here, I'll quickly, because I'm from JNU. So JNU is well known for foreign languages, and I quickly wanted to tell everybody, JNU does not offer bachelor programs for any other area except for languages. And since 2 years, it's also been for BTech for engineering. People in JNU don't know that there is a school of engineering, but I think now everybody should know that we've also recently, School of Engineering has become one of the first schools which have completed their online evaluation assessments in JNU. So people are aware of it now. Otherwise, bachelor programs for languages, we have foreign languages like Japanese, Korean, German, Spanish, French, and there were questions regarding how people can actually learn these languages and how can they, use them further. There was somebody who mentioned that I'm a Bengali, and Bengali and maybe learning German. So now let's say that you're a Bengali knowing German, but you don't know Hindi, but you know English very well. So you could maybe become a translator or maybe an interpreter. Those kind of jobs are definitely there. Another very important thing I want to point out is that why we have been talking about linguistics and we're talking about English language. I think there are a couple of viewers out who are actually getting they're misunderstanding it. They're thinking that English language is important to learn linguistics. No, it's not. Even in Hindi, there is something known as Bhasha Vigyan, all right? And just because you're not into, you're not so fluent in English language, that should not stop you from learning linguistics. That's one very important thing that I want to point out. And the other thing, the kind of jobs that you can do, it's amazing. Like, for example, lexicography. You know what is lexicography? It's the study of how to make dictionaries. If you are from an indigenous community, which is having an endangered language, which is an oral language, that means there is no script of your language. One thing, maybe with the knowledge of linguistics, you could actually create a script. First of all, having a script is not necessarily important to, save that language or to speak in that language. What is important is for communication purposes. If you require it, then you can create a script. Second thing, whether you have a script or not, through transcription, you can actually create a dictionary, which you can help in passing on your endangered language to the next generation. And you have speech pathology. Somebody has mentioned speech pathology. For example, one of the students of my professor, she's currently working in AIMS, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, as a speech pathologist. And what you need to do is after you do your master's in linguistics, you do another course, and maybe you do your PhD in it, and you can then apply for a job out there. So there are lots and lots of avenues which are possible. So thank you. Somebody else can take over. Thank you.
Anita, may I?
Of course.
Yes. So there were 3 points that I wanted to say in response. How does foreign language, how does it help your career prospects? Well, the first one, it's a very broad issue. Bilingualism, it is said to develop the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is the seat of executive functions. So by the sheer act of learning a foreign language, you are developing the 21st century skills, which are all about developing the prefrontal cortex. But that's at a far higher level. At a very practical level, there are companies that pay a premium to those who know a foreign language. So if somebody gets a job, say for 10 rupees is their salary, the person who knows the foreign language, and generally when we say foreign language, it's German, Spanish, and French are the three most commonly known languages. But if one knows a Scandinavian language, which is a very rare language to know in India, for these, there are companies that pay up to a 25% premium on your salary. So, 12.5 rupees it becomes. That's a practical aspect. And another thing about foreign languages that you may know German, but when you work in a multicultural team, you might be working with Latin Americans. So does foreign language help? Do you have to know a specific, because that is a question that comes up, which language should I learn? Which will give me the best opportunity? Well, I would say any of the international languages, French, German, Spanish, any of them. The reason being that there is a very recent research that is coming up called lingua receptiva, which is different from lingua franca, because companies adopt the policy of a lingua franca. It could be English, most often it is English, it could be any other language. But with lingua receptiva, what one is talking about is, suppose you already know Italian, you can work with all other countries which are, the languages that are very closely related to Italian, because you can continue to speak in Italian while the other person will continue to speak in, say, French or in Spanish. So you, by receptiva, you have to understand the language. You don't need to speak the language. So in learning any foreign language comes in very useful in a very practical way, as well as in a very, higher level way of developing your brain. Thank you.
Anita, may I come in here and respond to?
Dr. Chakraborty, I was just about to add to this question that what are the other, of course, you've spoken about the career prospects, but there must be also some other benefits of learning languages. So
if I may, with others' permission, I think what Sandesha and Dolon said just now, I completely endorse that. So there is significant amount of global research, especially in the clinical sciences, about the well-being aspect of language learning. And I would really alert everyone listening and tuning into this program to consider that, because learning other languages and learning to read other scripts. So there are two aspects to this. One is bilingualism, as Dolon you mentioned, or multilingualism, but also multiliteracies. And by multiliteracies, it's fairly well documented that it's about learning to uncode completely other script systems. So it's not about say if you know English, it's not about learning to read French, which uses the same script, but it's about learning, say, Japanese or learning Bangla. So these, so multilingualism and multiliteracy has long-term cognitive advantages. So you think in more, especially when learned, acquired as early in life as children, your brain is hardwired in a different way, and you have better cognitive skills. You are able to solve more complex problems compared to monolingual speakers or people who can only operate in a single script. Now this has also significant implication in later life, which is people with multilingual skills and multiliteracy skills, communities who have these in large numbers, have far less incidence of age-related issues like dementia and early onset of Alzheimer's compared to hosts of population, cohorts of population or communities who are largely monolingual and monoscriptural. So this is fairly well established. And it is very interesting that in some ways, the national education policy refers to this aspect of early childhood, the role of languages in early childhood education. I know there is a lot of anxiety about the use of mother tongues and regional languages that's been recommended, but this has really solid foundation in education research that learning through a language, I think the idea of mother tongue is a little bit contested. I think it's assumed by policymakers to be more stable than it really is. There are many of us, I have friends who, so I have a very close friend who a Bengali married to a Tamil lady, and their children don't know Tamil or Bengali well enough to be able to study in either languages. So it's complicated, but the idea that a child learns best in a language in which she or he gets home support, and that has much more long-term beneficial effects on the child's learning, especially as she or he grasps complex and abstract ideas in science and mathematics and greater numeracy. Now, your one's mother tongue, proficiency in mother tongue also enhances your one's acquisition of other languages. And there is a very interesting piece of research that we conducted with data from Pratham's ASAR surveys for 10 years, where we established that children with better mother tongue knowledge were performing in rural districts across India over a period of 10 years. They were performing much better in English reading skills. So there is, and very recently we have concluded a 4-year longitudinal research, which was led by Cambridge University, which provides many of the data and evidence base, looking at primary schools in Delhi, in rural Patna district, and from Hyderabad, that mother tongue based or regional language based instruction gave children greater learning outcomes and ability to solve complex problems. Thank you.
Anita, may I just come in very quickly over here? Can you hear me, Anita?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah, just to add to the bit about the globalized nature of language learning, I think we also need to look towards Asian languages. We've been focusing a little bit on the European side. There is a pronounced bias that I can perceive over here. Of course, yes, those languages too, but among the largest populations of language speakers are right at the top. I mentioned this before, Chinese. And among the top 5 or 6 in the world, Arabic. I would really like more and more Indians to learn both Chinese and Arabic, because these are not just because of the economic clout that these languages carry now, but also because it's very important for us to keep our connections going with our side of the world. So these two languages work in tandem with, of course, former colonial languages like English and Spanish, which are, of course, widely spoken across the world. French and German do carry the economic power to allow you to get jobs in these fields. But mind you, also Chinese and Arabic. There are centers in India which teach these languages. I think there is a shortage of people learning these languages. There are opportunities here that could well be grabbed by young people.
I completely agree, Ananda. I think the sheer number and the economic opportunity arguments are very compelling. And I think in terms of global statistics on these languages being picked up by other learners is very, very high. They may well be much higher than people learning the European foreign languages.
And I would like to add one more language to Mandarin and Arabic, and that is Japanese. That is also very widely used, although the country is very small.
And increasingly, Korean has become a very important global business language as well. And again, I think it goes back to your point, Dolon, you were making. It's not. I think we sometimes obsess too much with, you know, having a near native speaker writing proficiency. Sometimes you just need to get by and understand people's communication. Sometimes just understand people's body language in those languages, the tone, the tonality of conversations.
I want to just point out one thing that I completely agree with what Dr. Chakrabarti said. It's more important that we want to communicate with people, all right? And that intention should be clear. Rest all will follow. There are people who do not want to learn English language and they feel that they're being compelled, they're being forced, all right? I've had such students in my heterogeneous classes, and you know, you are trying to initially, the first few classes, you're just trying to make them understand that what is the reason. And you know, there are, you know, you have to kind of have these separate sessions with them, and then you understand that, okay, they were from an environment and the confidence level is down, they get scared, and then slowly you build up on that confidence, and then you make them understand that don't worry, you know, you will have some, you know, moments where you're going to make, you know, errors, but that is how you're going to learn. Because a child who's picking up a language, even his or her own mother tongue, will make mistakes. And what happens? The adults will start laughing, but does the child stop talking? No, the child learns from those mistakes and goes further. I always tell my students, make the maximum mistakes you can make in my class, because that's what will make me know where you're making the mistakes, and I can help you, I can correct you, and then you learn from that and try to avoid making those mistakes again. So I think as teachers, we need to create that environment, whatever language we are teaching, and, you know, build up on that self-confidence of the student. That is extremely important. And the other thing is communication skills. We are not talking about communication skills only in English language. It can even be in Hindi. I mean, I know people who go to South India and they're like, oh, I wish I knew the South Indian languages, or I knew it. It would have helped me to connect with them better. So those things are definitely there. And I thank Professor Lal for talking about Arabic. So to all the people out there who are Arabic speakers, salam alaikum, kaifa halik, alhamdulillah. So I was born and raised in Dubai. So Arabic was the third language of mine, which I had to learn from the first grade along with Hindi. So imagine my mother had to learn Arabic from our Arab neighbors or Muslim neighbors so that she could teach us Alif Batar. But but now I realize the important, because the maximum number of languages that I got exposed to, that helped me to also kind of, because language and culture are interrelated. Let us not forget that. They go hand in hand. If you respect someone's language, you're respecting their culture, you're respecting what is their ethnic identity. And I also agree with what Dr. Chakrabarti said. He talked about mother tongue. If you look at the census of the mother tongue in our country, people say mother tongue is the language which the mother passes on to the child. In reality, if you look at mother tongue, it's not necessarily like that. Mother tongue, I learned in JNU, actually means it could be up to, you know, whether you think that's your ethnic identity, then that is what it is. But I remember last week for an ELT conference, one of my colleagues who's a Malayali, she said that I don't associate Malayalam with my mother tongue. I associate Hindi. So that is up to you. You choose your mother tongue. That is extremely important. That is what I wanted to point out. Thank you.
On that question of confidence in language usage and learning, can I just make one comment? And this is quite important and germane to this conversation, especially in the Indian education context. What we notice in the language classroom, and it's again language agnostic. It happens in where the mother tongue is being taught. It happens where a second Indian language is being taught. It happens with in any English everywhere. There is a preponderance of teachers' talk time. Technically speaking, it's called TTT in ELT context, teachers' talk time. So what we do at the British Council, for instance, is reduce teachers' talk time to a bare minimum. And the role of the teacher is that of a facilitator only, and increase people's talk time. So all of the things that Dolon and Sandesha you mentioned about, you know, using the language, gaining confidence through practice and more practice and more practice, and making a lot of errors and adjustments as you go along. And I think there is also a bit of an obsession with the written form of the language. I think uh, we tend to think of languages that if you are able to write it perfectly, if you're able to compose perfect grammatical sentences, only then language matters. But that really is not the case. All languages, except I think for artificial languages, computer languages, all languages exist as oral languages first, and then they are codified into written languages. So therefore, I think the ability to speak and articulate, and this is also linked to a little bit, the problem is linked to the assessment systems that we use in Indian education system. It's too much based on, there's too much reliance on paper-based tests and written tests. There isn't a lot that's done to test our listening skills in any language, and we are typically poor listeners as a culture, I think. And we are not great speakers. We in any language, I think we struggle to speak. And there is a lot to be said about the weak foundations of language teaching, irrespective of any language in the Indian school system, and that really needs to shift.
Yes,
May I just come in over there?
Of course, Dr. Joshi, yes.
Yeah, so I would like to refer back to, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So I would like to refer back to what Professor Anando Lal mentioned about the focus, shifting the focus from purely European languages to other Asian languages. So, so linking it to the developments happening in the AI industry or the computing field, we can observe that there's a growing interest and growing focus on Indic languages. So we need to know our languages, and not just our language as in our first language, but even our second, third neighboring languages better, because as per whatever surveys like big companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they've conducted, they've realized that the number of people using softwares in indigenous languages or Indic languages is more than people using software in English languages. So there's a conscious effort put in by all the big companies into developing software in Indic languages. So it's not just English or even European languages. Now Indic languages are gaining more and more importance, and those who like I can see a few questions like I'm a native Bengali speaker, or I'm a native Hindi speaker, then what's the scope? I mean, you don't need to be disheartened. You still have scope, because now people are realizing the power of Indic languages. Well, I mean, one aspect is sheer numbers. We are like, nobody can beat us at numbers except for China. But so we have forced these companies to start developing software in Indic languages. So I think apart from European languages, we should also focus on Indian languages, and that should also have tremendous scope. In fact, Microsoft nowadays, they have a dedicated unit to do research in Indian languages, and they specifically publish and focus on Indian language. And there are quite a few startups that focus on these aspects of Indian languages. So I think people need not be disheartened just because they don't know French or German. Our Indian languages are good enough to get them jobs.
Yeah, Anita, quickly, I just wanted to point out one thing. Since we're talking to the young minds out there, the next generation, and we're talking about careers, everybody wants to know, what language should I study? What subject should I study? Why? Because they want to earn money. Everybody wants to become like, I want to get into IIT because after IIT, IM, and then go abroad and start earning in dollars and pounds. Let me make one thing clear. Whether you're in IIT or not in IIT, try to study what you can possibly have a little bit of passion for. Bring that passion. Once you bring in that passion, you will be able to adapt to the situation. There are so many people, after they do their engineering in IIT, then they switch completely into the world of arts or something else altogether. Why? Because then they realize that their calling is something else. Okay, so main thing is try to find out what is it that you want to study. Just because people who are studying Japanese are earning much more doesn't mean you just go for Japanese. You go for something that you think you will be able to learn. Try to do a little bit of research, try to do a little bit of groundwork. And first of all, let me tell you, the fact that you're listening to all of us right now, I applaud all of you because you've already started your research work. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sandesha. I think there are a few questions. I would like to go back to what Dr. Chakraborty had also mentioned, because there are some more questions. I think the audience wants a little bit of detail regarding the fact, I mean, the teaching methodologies in schools, I mean, pertaining to language teaching are not always the most modern, I mean, so to say, teaching methods are always not available to all students. What tips could you give the students who are trying to learn English or other languages, so to say, something that they can do at home and improve their skills? Anything that they can do to harness their skills from home?
Thank you. I think I touched upon this aspect about practice, and the example that I often give to students who really want to pick up a language, English, or for that matter, any other language that they have to put in some effort, is there really is no alternative to practicing a language. And the example I give is that of Virat Kohli, phenomenally talented batsman though he is one of the most hardworking sportsmen in the world. So I think there is very little premium to be had on just talent in learning languages. One has to practice and immerse oneself in the target language. So I think reading matters, listening matters, and now there's just so many avenues of picking up languages, especially with the prevalence of the online and digital learning opportunities, but also the entertainment opportunities that you get in so many target languages. I witnessed from up close my daughter pick up Japanese counting skills 1 to 10 as a child, even before she picked up Bangla 1 to 10 by just watching Japanese cartoons. So I think we have to really unleash and rely on the tremendous power of technology. I think it's interesting that we are having this conversation online during COVID, during these pandemic times. The point about digital technology in education is this, that all of this technology has been with us for a long time, at least a decade, if not longer. It took this global pandemic for us, for the whole world's education system to be pushed over that edge. It has some implications, not all of it is nice. There are issues of access and equity, but I think those are short to medium term issues. What it has really proved that, you know, technology exists and it works and it can be adapted, provided the physical barriers to technology are overcome, and the same applies to language learning. I think there's just a huge number of stuff online. From British Council, we have made an enormous amount of our English language resources available free online. But they exist for other languages as well. Please use those resources that there are. Read newspapers, watch television, listen to music. I think that's how I got my Urdu pronunciation reasonably right, by listening to ghazals. So I think that's what I would like to share with everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Chakraborty. Any of the other panelists would like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to make a
Yes,
comment which I've been wanting to make for some time now. And this is up to the all the people, the participants who have joined in to kind of maybe do this by vote, but I know who's going to be the outright winner. We've been talking about body language. We've been talking about communicative skills. We've been talking about interview skills as well. And I can tell you among us 5 panelists, there's one person who's scored the highest among those. As a theater director, I can tell you that that person probably has some dance training or theater training. And I have absolutely no doubt that all participants should learn a thing or two from Sandesha. Because of the way she uses her hands, her eyes, her passion is in a 2-dimensional medium, which is very difficult for us to actually evaluate. And I'm pretty sure that the participants agree on this, because many of us, somewhat older, are rather straight-jacketed. Look at me, kind of not moving my arms and hands at all.
I completely agree with you, Ananda.
But in the interview, in the online interview, and as well as communicative skills as a teacher, now you have to be much more engaged in that 2-dimensional frame. And she's done it. I'd love to be your be taught by you, Sandesha, sometime. Okay.
Oh my God, Professor Lal, you will not believe this because it'll look like a mutual kind of praising session happening here. But when I was actually listening to you and I was thinking, he is the kind of person a professor should be like. And look at me, I'm so, all over the place kind of a person. I'm very expressive with my, whatever that my thoughts are. And I was actually thinking of praising you, maybe emailing you separately. So here I am saying the same thing out to all of you. And let me point out one particular thing. Each and every panelist out here has something that each and every audience member can pick up. There are certain attributes that you would like to take from Ms. Gupta, from Dr. Deepanjanan, and then Professor Ananda, obviously, and then Dr. Joshi, and then obviously our beautiful moderator, Anita. So what we need to do is you pick up the best from the best and you leave out the worst from the worst. This is what I learned from my mom. You learn from both the kinds of people. And the other thing I wanted to also point out before I go is that there are a lot of people who are talking about how do I improve my language in English language or whatever language. Please remember one thing, a simple thing which I'm sure all the language teachers do. They always say, are you having an input to bring out an output? Listening and reading are input. Speaking and writing are output. You cannot be a good speaker, communicator, or writer if you're not having the inputs. If you're not listening to songs in Korean, if you're not watching anything in Korean, then you cannot expect to actually start speaking the way a Korean would, or even, and we're not talking about, just trying to have an American accent or a British accent. We're talking about having a neutral accent wherein people can understand you. And for that, you need to have these inputs happening. So that's one of the last things I would like to say. And dance is something that I haven't trained as such, Professor Lal, but yes, I love moving to any songs that I can move to. But martial arts is one thing that I've done, sir. Thank you.
Excellent.
Can I just quickly point out the point that Sandesha made about the importance of not caring too much about the accent. I think we obsess a bit too much in our accent, especially while speaking in English or any other foreign language. I think it really makes not too much of a difference unless you are using it in highly specialized contexts. I think accents doesn't make too much of a difference. We obsess a bit too much about it while learning languages. And as a result, we don't practice enough and we are hesitant and shy of using the language we already have.
Thank you, Dr. Chakraborty. I think there is a question which is coming in and out, and I think you have also addressed it partially, and I think I should take it at this point of time. It is addressed through Professor Lal, but I think it's open to all panelists. That is with the new education policy, emphasizing on teaching with the mother tongue. How does that impact the language scenario in India?
Okay, I will take that because I have very strong opinions about that. And you see, I mean, again, we've learned this so clearly from empirical evidence in linguistics, in sociology, that children pick up languages so fast, and we've had enough examples from our own panelists over here in the early years, that of course there should be a medium of instruction, but there's absolutely no harm in, and it's actually more preferable if they were to pick up at least 2 languages at the school level. So mother tongue plus 1, and of course, again, Indians are multilingual by nature. So we must use this opportunity for us to cultivate, to nurture what we do have. Are you not getting my, are you able to see me? I'm sorry, I can't once again see myself. Is that
We
okay?
can see and hear you perfectly all right.
Okay, all right, sorry about that. So yeah, and of course, West Bengal has a rather sorry history. And I think we should mention this for those of you who don't know it outside West Bengal. We, Devanjan is laughing, rightly, because we went to this single medium of instruction, Bengali, in the school levels. For how many years was it, Devanjan? 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And what we learned from that was that an entire generation or more of graduates coming out from the universities were unable to cope with the market demands for those who needed some other language, notably English, at which we were very good before the West Bengal government instructed Bengali to be the medium of instruction. So I really absolutely do not agree with this 1 language formula. There should be preferably a 3 language formula or even more. And I would actually strongly support what has happened in Andhra, where you're probably aware that they are teaching English as well. This has just happened over the last month or so as a medium of instruction in the schools.
If I may come in, and I will beg to differ with my teacher a little bit. I agree entirely in the main with the thrust of your argument, Ananduda. However, I think there is a distinction that I would like to make, and it's a very important distinction between a medium of instruction and a subject of study. So I think English as a medium of instruction in the early years, which is for now in the new education system, it begins at age 3, which is preschool level, right up to, I think, age 11 or 12. So that in that phase, I think there is, as you also mentioned, that there is a wealth of empirical data about the importance of the foundations being laid down in a language that is also the home language of the learner. So because education is not just what happens in school. So I think that the foundations of good learning is laid at home as well as school. So that's why the importance of, I think, the idea of a mother tongue based education. But I think the national education policy is quite clear in that distinction, that there is a question of English medium instruction, and across India we know that these almost sudden shift to English medium instruction in context where there is not enough teacher proficiency in English to handle all subjects in English, particularly numeracy and mathematics, arithmetic, and then the question of home support. So I think the new national education policy quite rightly advocates the use of mother tongue or a regional language in the early years, but it does not stop, as West Bengal did many years back, using of teaching of other languages, including English, as an additional subject. And I think that's important too, and stimulate the tremendous language learning ability of a learner in the early years of his or her life. There's one other development economics angle that I like to bring in here. Very often in this debates about the economic benefit of English medium instruction, we forget that the data set that we are looking at, i.e. middle class urban learners, there is already in the first few years, in the first 3 years of a child's life, there's a huge difference made by early childhood nutrition. So, because in the earlier generations, there was such poor early childhood nutrition in many other parts of India, that by the time you look at English medium as the causal effect of people getting better jobs later on in life, we are looking at the wrong set of questions and problems.
Any of the other panelists would like to add something to this? Sandesha, you want to? Okay, so I think it's already 5 p.m. today, and that's all the time we have for today's webinar. From the chat that I'm getting a very good feedback of all the panelists and the interaction and the information that was shared today. So a big thank you to all the panelists. Thank you so much for being here, from the students as well, from the participants. And thank you, ABP, for organizing this. So that is all for today. Thank you and have a great evening.
And thank you, Anita, for being such a great chair.
Yeah, Anita, so that's exactly, if possible, can we all unmute ourselves, and we would like to applaud you as well as all the wonderful audience out here, because more than 200, I think there more than 280 people are there with us since the beginning, and because of the connectivity issues, there were more than 300, but people keep going off and on, and they keep joining us. So we want to applaud for everybody out there. We want to wish everybody good health, and the situation that we are in, we hope as a country, as a nation, and all around the world, we get out of it soon. And I would love to invite each and every one of you to JNU. This is JNU's Convention Center behind me. And it's a beautiful university with a lot of beautiful people out there. And we are well known for our wonderful dhaba snacks and everything. So let us all applaud for each other. Dr. Joshi. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.